You ever wake up one day and suddenly realize that most of the people around you annoy the hell out of you? And I'm not talking about random strangers or people you never liked anyway. I'm talking about people who used to be fine, people you used to enjoy being around, people who maybe you even loved. But now, after something shifted inside you, after some kind of awakening or realization, you can barely stand to be in the same room with them. Their conversations feel shallow, their concerns feel trivial, their whole way of being in the world feels like fingernails on a chalkboard to your soul. And the worst part? You feel guilty about it. You tell yourself you're being judgmental, that you're becoming one of those insufferable people who thinks they're better than everyone else. You try to fake interest in their stories. You force yourself to laugh at their jokes. You pretend everything is fine, but inside you're screaming. Inside you're desperately looking for the exit, and you start to wonder, what the hell is wrong with me? Why can't I just be normal and enjoy normal things with normal people anymore? If this is you, if you're feeling this painful disconnection from almost everyone you know, then what I'm about to show you will not only explain exactly why this is happening, but also why it's not actually a problem at all. It's a transformation. There's something profoundly disorienting about the experience of waking up, not from sleep, but from the dream of who you thought you were supposed to be. One day you're moving through life with a certain set of values, a certain way of seeing things, a certain understanding of what matters, and then something happens. Maybe you read something that cracked your perspective open. Maybe you went through something painful that forced you to question everything. Maybe you just got quiet enough to hear the voice inside that had been whispering for years that something wasn't right, and suddenly, like coming up for air after being underwater, you see things differently. The world looks the same, but you're not looking at it with the same eyes anymore. And this is where the real problem begins, because the people around you, the people who were your friends, your family, your colleagues, they didn't wake up with you. They're still dreaming the same dream. They're still playing the same game. They're still worried about the same things, chasing the same goals, having the same circular conversations that lead nowhere. And at first, you try to share what you've seen. You try to tell them about this new perspective, this new understanding, but they look at you like you're speaking a foreign language. They nod politely, but their eyes are glazed over, or worse, they get defensive. They tell you you're overthinking things. They say you've changed, and not in a good way. They want the old you back, the you who fit comfortably into their world, the you who didn't make them question anything. So you start to pull back. You stop sharing. You smile and nod when they talk about things that feel completely irrelevant to you now. You watch them stress about promotions and possessions and what other people think, and you feel this growing chasm between you and them. It's not that you think you're better than them. It's that you're operating from a completely different framework now, and trying to connect with someone across that gap feels exhausting and futile. You sit in conversations, and you can feel yourself disappearing, becoming a ghost, nodding along while your real self is somewhere far away, untouched by any of this. What Michel Foucault understood, what he spent his entire life exploring, is that we are not born with fixed selves. We are made, we are constructed by the systems of power and knowledge that surround us, by the institutions we move through, by the discourses that tell us what is normal and what is deviant, what is success and what is failure, what is a good life and what is a wasted one. From the moment we're born, we're being shaped, molded, disciplined into particular ways of being. And most people never question this. They live their entire lives inside this invisible cage, following rules they didn't choose, pursuing goals that were handed to them, judging themselves by standards that were imposed on them. They become, in Foucault's terms, docile bodies, perfectly adapted to the systems that control them. But what happens when you start to see the cage? What happens when you begin to recognize that so much of what you thought was just natural, just the way things are, is actually constructed, arbitrary, designed to serve particular interests that might not be your own? This is what Foucault calls critical consciousness, and it changes everything. Because once you see how you've been shaped, once you recognize the invisible forces that have been governing your thoughts and desires and behaviors, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to the innocent acceptance of everything you've been told. You start to question. You start to resist. You start to imagine different ways of being. And this is why you suddenly can't stand to be around most people. It's not because they're bad people. It's not because there's something wrong with them. It's because they're still operating inside the system that you're starting to step outside of. They're still playing by rules that you're beginning to question. They're still pursuing prizes that you're realizing are worthless. And when you're in the process of this transformation, when you're caught between the old world and the new one, everyone who's still fully embedded in the old world feels like they're trying to pull you back in. Every conversation becomes a negotiation where they're unconsciously trying to get you to validate their choices, their values, their way of life. And you can't do it anymore. You can't pretend that things matter when they don't. You can't fake enthusiasm for pursuits that feel empty to you now. Foucault talks about practices of freedom, these small acts of resistance and self-creation that allow us to shape ourselves differently than we've been shaped by power. And one of the most difficult things about engaging in these practices is the loneliness that comes with them. Because you're not just changing your opinions or your preferences, you're changing your whole mode of existence. You're learning to relate to yourself and to the world in a fundamentally different way. And most people around you don't understand this. They see you changing and they interpret it as you becoming difficult, strange, too serious, too intense. They want you to lighten up, to be fun again, to stop making everything so complicated. But you can't, because you've seen something they haven't seen yet, and you can't unsee it just to make them comfortable. There's a concept in Foucault's work called care of the self, and it's radically different from what we usually mean by self-care today. It's not about bubble baths and affirmations. It's about the fundamental work of shaping your own existence, of becoming the author of your own life, rather than just acting out a script that was written for you. And this work requires solitude. It requires stepping away from the constant noise of other people's expectations and judgments and ideas about who you should be. It requires creating space to hear your own voice, to discover your own values, to figure out what kind of life you actually want to live rather than what kind of life you've been told to want. And here's the thing that nobody tells you about this process. The people who annoy you now, the people you can barely stand to be around, they're showing you something important. They're showing you who you used to be. They're mirrors reflecting back the version of yourself that you're trying to leave behind. Every time someone talks about something that feels shallow to you, every time someone worries about something that feels trivial, every time someone makes a choice that feels like capitulation to a system you're trying to escape, you're seeing your old self. And part of why it's so irritating is because there's still a part of you that's tempted to go back. There's still a part of you that remembers how much easier it was when you didn't question everything, when you just went along, when you fit in. The discomfort you feel around other people is actually the discomfort of your own transformation. You're between two worlds. You're not fully in the old one anymore, but you're not completely established in the new one either. You're in what Foucault might call a liminal space, a threshold, a place of becoming. And threshold spaces are inherently uncomfortable. You don't have solid ground under your feet. You can't see clearly where you're going. You're vulnerable and uncertain and often very alone. But this is also where all real transformation happens. This is where you stop being who you were told to be and start discovering who you actually are. I knew someone once who went through exactly this. She had always been the life of the party, the one everyone wanted around, the one who could make any gathering feel fun and light. She had a whole circle of friends, and they did everything together. They had their rituals, their inside jokes, their shared way of moving through the world. And then she went through something. I won't say what, because it doesn't matter. What matters is that it cracked her open. It made her start asking questions she had never asked before. Questions about meaning and purpose and what she was actually doing with her life. And slowly, over months, she started to change. She stopped wanting to go to the same bars and parties. She started spending more time alone, reading, thinking, writing in journals. Her friends noticed, and at first they were concerned. They asked if she was okay. They invited her out more, trying to pull her back into the old rhythms. But she kept declining, not because she was depressed or antisocial, but because those activities just didn't feed her anymore. They felt hollow. And then the judgment started. Her friends began to talk about how she had changed, how she thought she was too good for them now, how she had become boring and serious. They stopped inviting her, and for a while she felt terrible about it. She felt guilty and confused. She wondered if there really was something wrong with her, but she kept going. She kept following this pull towards something different, something more authentic. And eventually, slowly, she started to find new people. People who were also asking questions. People who were also trying to live differently. People who understood that transformation is painful and necessary and worth it. She built a new life, not by rejecting the old one out of contempt, but by growing beyond it. So if you're in this place right now, if you're struggling with this painful disconnection from people who used to feel like home, here's what you need to understand. You're not becoming a bad person. You're not becoming judgmental or superior. You're becoming yourself. And the process of becoming yourself necessarily involves leaving behind the versions of yourself that were constructed by others. It involves disappointing people. It involves being misunderstood. It involves periods of deep loneliness where you feel like you're the only person in the world who sees things the way you see them. But you have to trust this process. You have to trust that the discomfort you feel around certain people is actually your internal compass telling you that you've outgrown that frequency. Not better than, not superior to, just different from, operating on a different wavelength, and trying to force yourself to stay connected to people who are on a completely different wavelength is not kindness, to them or to yourself. It's self-abandonment. It's pretending to be someone you're not anymore just to avoid the discomfort of change. This doesn't mean you have to be cruel or dismissive to people who are still living in ways you've moved beyond. You can be compassionate and kind while also creating distance. You can wish people well while acknowledging that you're on different paths now. You can love people and still recognize that being around them depletes you rather than nourishes you. Boundaries are not walls. They're not rejections. They're just honest acknowledgements of where you are and what you need. And here's something else Foucault understood deeply. The systems of power that shape us, they don't just operate through force and coercion. They operate through normalization, through making certain ways of being seem natural and inevitable and right, and other ways of being seem strange and deviant and wrong. When you start to wake up, when you start to question and resist, the people around you who are still embedded in the system will often try to normalize you back into it. They'll tell you you're overthinking. They'll tell you to just relax and enjoy life. They'll tell you that you're making things harder than they need to be. And they genuinely believe they're helping you. They genuinely think they're pulling you back from some dangerous edge. But what they're actually doing is trying to pull you back into the cage because your freedom threatens their sense of security in their own captivity. You have to be willing to be seen as strange. You have to be willing to be misunderstood. You have to be willing to let people think you've lost your way when actually, for the first time, you're finding it. This is what Foucault calls the courage of truth, the willingness to speak and live your truth even when it makes you unpopular, even when it isolates you, even when it costs you relationships. Because the alternative is to spend your whole life performing a version of yourself that isn't real, just to maintain connections that aren't actually nourishing you. The people you're meant to connect with now, the people who will actually understand you and meet you where you are, they're out there. But you won't find them if you're still trying to fit yourself back into spaces that no longer fit you. You have to be willing to walk through the desert of disconnection to get to the oasis of authentic community. You have to trust that when you're living from your truth, you become a beacon for others who are also searching for theirs. But first, you have to be willing to stand alone. This process of waking up, this process of seeing through the systems that have shaped you and beginning to shape yourself differently, it's not a one-time event, it's ongoing. You'll wake up in layers. You'll see new things that were invisible to you before. And with each new seeing, you might find yourself once again disconnected from people who used to make sense to you. This is not a sign that something's wrong. This is a sign that you're growing. And growth, real growth, is almost always accompanied by loss. Loss of old identities, old certainties, old relationships. The question is, Whether you're willing to let go of what's dying so that what's being born can fully come to life. So the next time you're sitting in a conversation, feeling completely disconnected, feeling that familiar irritation rising up, feeling guilty about not being able to just relax and enjoy the company of people who used to feel like your people, take a breath. Recognize what's actually happening. You're not broken. You're not becoming a terrible person. You're becoming free. And freedom always comes with a cost. The cost is comfort. The cost is fitting in. The cost is being understood by people who are still seeing the world through the lens you've taken off. But the reward is getting to live a life that's actually yours, a life where you're not just following a script, not just playing a role, not just trying to be normal and acceptable and safe, a life where you're actually alive. And if this resonates with you, if you recognize yourself in this struggle, leave a like on this video so more people who are going through this same painful transformation can find it and know they're not alone. Subscribe to this channel for more deep dives into the philosophy and psychology of personal transformation, and drop a comment below. Tell me, how long have you been feeling this disconnection? How long have you been trying to fit yourself back into spaces that don't fit anymore? Because I promise you, there are thousands of people reading these comments who are going through exactly the same thing. And sometimes, just knowing that, just seeing that you're not the only one, is enough to give you the courage to keep going. The real reason you dislike almost everyone after waking up is not because there's something wrong with them or something wrong with you. It's because you're no longer the same person who formed those connections. You've changed. And change, real change, doesn't just mean adding new interests or new habits. It means becoming a different kind of person altogether. A person who can't pretend anymore. A person who can't perform anymore. A person who needs truth and depth and authenticity like they need air. And yes, that person is harder to be, that person is lonelier, at least for a while, but that person is real. And being real, even when it's painful, even when it's isolating, is always better than being comfortable but false. Always.